I never imagined it would come to this. When I married Dave, I knew he had a daughter from a previous marriage, but I fell in love with him, and I thought I could love her too. Emily was 12 when we first met, and she was distant. Not that I blamed her, her mom had just left, and she was dealing with her own stuff. I gave her space and tried my best to show her that I wasn't trying to replace her mom. Years went by, and we started to bond more. Sure, we had our ups and downs, like any relationship, but I thought we were in a good place when she got engaged. I was thrilled for her. As her stepmother, I figured I would be a part of the wedding in some capacity, maybe not front and center, but there nonetheless. Then the invitations came, and I was hit with a wave of disbelief. Emily had named her biological father to walk her down the aisle. I wasn't even mentioned. I tried to brush it off at first. Maybe it was just a mistake or a sentimental gesture. She was still my daughter in many ways, but that night, I couldn't ignore the feeling of rejection. The wedding day came, and everything about it felt off. Emily barely spoke to me. I watched as she smiled and laughed with her father, her real dad, and it stung. But I convinced myself that it was just nerves, that maybe she was overwhelmed. I went through the motions, watching from the sidelines as if I didn't matter. I wasn't even asked for my opinion on the details of the day, not even on what I'd thought was my role in it. Emily seemed to have forgotten me. When it was time to give the toast, it was her father who stood up, making jokes, recalling memories of her childhood. I couldn't help but feel like an outsider at my own family's event. The real punch came after the ceremony when it came time to talk about the financials. Emily and her new husband had a massive wedding bill. My husband Dave had always been the breadwinner, but Emily had assumed her biological father would foot most of the bill, leaving me with a small contribution. Dave was upset, but I just couldn't take it anymore. I had tried, for years, to be a mother figure to her, but she had shown me who I truly was to her. So, I made a decision. I didn't stick around for the awkward conversations. I left the reception early, under the guise of an urgent appointment. As I drove away, I felt a strange sense of relief. Maybe it was the closure I needed. Emily had made it clear that I was no longer in her life the way I had hoped. The next day, my husband tried to reach out to Emily, but she was distant and cold. It was clear she had moved on from me. I don't know what went wrong, but I've learned that sometimes you give love and effort, and it just isn't enough. Now, I focus on my own happiness. I'm not sure what the future holds for me and Emily, but for now, I've accepted the reality that she has chosen her biological father over me. At the end of the day, I don't regret leaving early. If she couldn't see the love I gave her, then I wasn't going to waste another second. Life goes on. And so do I. I thought leaving the wedding would give me clarity, but it only left me feeling more confused. The next few weeks were an emotional roller coaster. I tried to focus on work and my own hobbies, but there was always a lingering ache in my chest. I had given so much of myself, and now, it felt like I was nothing more than an afterthought. Dave was hurt too. I could see it in his eyes, though he never said it outright. He tried to console me, but I knew how much it bothered him that Emily had pulled away. It wasn't just me she was rejecting, it was us, our family. He tried to talk to her, but she kept her distance. She was an adult now, and she had the power to make her own choices, but that didn't make it any easier. Weeks passed, and then came the phone call that shattered whatever was left of my connection to her. It was Emily, calling me with an unexpected request. She needed help. She and her new husband had run into some financial trouble, and the wedding costs were hitting them harder than expected. She asked me, almost as if it was routine, if I could contribute more to the bill. I froze when I heard her voice. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of how she had treated me. It was as if nothing had ever happened, as if I was just another person she could rely on when it was convenient. I wanted to scream, to remind her of everything I had done for her, but I stayed calm. "I'm sorry, Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I'm not in a position to help anymore. There was silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost feel the weight of her disappointment, even though she wasn't saying a word. Okay, she finally said, her voice flat. I understand. That was the last time I heard from her. I realized then that I had been playing a part in a story that wasn't mine anymore. I wasn't the stepmother she needed, and maybe I had been fooling myself into thinking I could be. I had tried to be a mother to a daughter who didn't want me, and now, I was finally freeing myself from that burden. I didn't reach out to her again, not even for a birthday or a holiday. I couldn't. I had given up my place in her life so easily, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized I was better off without that constant pain. There were people who genuinely wanted me in their lives, people who appreciated me. And in the end, that's what I needed to focus on. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't being rejected. It's accepting that the person rejecting you doesn't even know the value of what they've lost. Months passed, and though it was hard, I began to find peace. I focused more on my relationship with Dave. We had gone through our own ups and downs, but this felt different. Losing Emily's presence in our lives was tough on him, but he was there for me, and I realized that I didn't need to hold on to something that was no longer working. Then came the unexpected. One afternoon, Dave and I were sitting on the porch, enjoying the warmth of a rare sunny day, when he looked at me with a look I hadn't seen in a long time, guilt mixed with regret. I think I need to talk to Emily again, he said softly. I hadn't expected that. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go down that road. But I could see the weight of everything on him. He missed her, missed being part of her life in a way that only a father could understand. I knew, deep down, that he was struggling with the decision to push through the pain or let her go completely. I didn't want to hold him back, but I couldn't help but feel hesitant. I didn't want to be the one who made him choose. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about him and his daughter. Do what you need to do, Dave, I said, my voice quiet. But you need to understand something. She made her choice. And maybe she doesn't even realize what she's lost. But you shouldn't lose yourself in it. He nodded, looking out at the horizon. I know. I just can't help but feel like I failed her. And I don't want to lose her for good. I understood. There was no manual for this. There was no perfect way to navigate the complexities of blending families and broken relationships. All I knew was that I couldn't keep playing the role of someone who wasn't wanted. And I didn't think it was fair to expect Dave to either. A few days later, Dave reached out to Emily. It wasn't the conversation he expected. She was defensive at first, distant, but as he kept talking, the walls began to come down. She admitted she had been feeling overwhelmed by everything, the wedding, the pressure from her mom's side of the family, and yes, the emotional distance between us. I was stunned when Dave told me that part. I had never imagined it was all coming from her own insecurities, her fear of being caught between two families. But even then, the damage was done. The bridges had been burned, and the trust between us had fractured. Emily's apology, though heartfelt, couldn't erase the years of emotional neglect I had endured. That night, I lay in bed thinking about everything. My mind drifted between memories of the woman I had tried to be for her, and the reality of where we stood now. I knew I would never be the person she turned to for comfort or advice. I knew that chapter was over, and the hardest part was finally accepting it. The next day, Dave and I talked more about what this meant for us moving forward. He was still determined to maintain a relationship with Emily, but I had made it clear that I wasn't going to be part of it anymore. He respected that. Months went by, and though I never spoke to Emily again, I kept hearing bits and pieces through Dave. She had moved on with her life, focusing on her new family and trying to make peace with her past. There were moments when I missed her, when I longed for the bond we could have had, but then I remembered how much energy I had wasted on someone who didn't see my worth. It was a painful lesson in knowing when to let go. And it made me realize that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is step back and allow people to grow, even if it means they grow apart from you. A year passed. I had settled into a new rhythm of life, one that didn't revolve around trying to prove my place to anyone. I poured more energy into myself, into my relationship with Dave, and into the things that brought me peace. It wasn't an easy transition, but it was necessary. The ache from losing Emily had dulled, replaced by an understanding that I had done everything I could. Then, one quiet evening, just as I was finishing dinner with Dave, I got a message. It was from Emily. At first, I stared at the screen, unsure of how to react. I hadn't heard from her in months. The message was simple, just a few short lines, but it struck me. Asterisk, I've been thinking about everything, and I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. I was confused, scared, and I took it out on you. I'm not asking for anything, but I wanted to let you know that I regret how things went down. I hope you're doing okay, asterisk. I felt a rush of emotions. Relief, anger, sadness, even a little bit of hope. Her apology was long overdue, and while I appreciated the sentiment, I couldn't help but feel like it was a bit too late. It didn't change the fact that she had replaced me at one of the most important moments of her life, or that she had ignored me for so long. It didn't change the years of effort I had put in, only to be cast aside. I showed Dave the message. His face was filled with a mix of hope and caution. He didn't want me to feel pressured into responding, but he also knew how much this meant to him. "What are you thinking?" he asked gently. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to reach out and tell her everything I've been holding back. But the other part of me wonders if it's worth it. She's living her life now, and I'm living mine. Maybe it's better this way." After a few days of thinking it over, I finally decided to send a response. I kept it short, honest, and kind, but not overly emotional. I didn't want to set myself up for more disappointment. Asterisk, thank you for your message, Emily. It means a lot to hear from you. I hope you're finding happiness in your life. As for me, I'm doing well. I've come to terms with everything, and while I'll always care about you, I think it's time for both of us to move forward separately. Asterisk, I didn't expect her to reply. But to my surprise, she did, almost immediately. Asterisk, I understand. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed. I'll always be grateful for what you did for me. Asterisk, that was the last message. We never spoke again after that. I didn't feel closure, not in the way I thought I would. But I felt something different, peace. It was a quiet kind of peace, the kind that comes from knowing you've done everything you could, even if the other person didn't understand or appreciate it. The kind of peace that comes with accepting that some relationships are meant to fade away, no matter how hard you try to hold on. Over time, I came to realize that I wasn't the villain in Emily's story. I wasn't the one who had turned away from her, I was the one who tried to love her in the only way I knew how. In the end, her journey was her own, and mine was mine. Dave and I kept moving forward. The loss of Emily was something we both carried, but we found new ways to create joy together. We made our own memories, without the weight of expectations from a daughter who no longer saw me as family. And that was enough. A couple of years passed since that final exchange with Emily, and life slowly but surely found its new rhythm. Dave and I had come to terms with the reality of the situation, though the silence between us and Emily remained. It wasn't easy, but we had each other, and we had built something strong out of the fragments of what once was. Then, unexpectedly, a letter arrived one day. I was sitting at the kitchen table when Dave walked in, holding an envelope with Emily's name on it. My heart skipped a beat. It had been so long since I had seen her handwriting, or anything from her at all. I knew Dave's mixed feelings before he even spoke. "I don't know what to do with this," he said quietly, placing the letter in front of me. "It's been so long, and I don't want to give you false hope. But, maybe she's reaching out again." I looked at the envelope for a long moment. The tightness in my chest returned, but this time it wasn't the same gut-wrenching hurt I'd felt before. It was something different, something cautious, like I had learned to protect my heart. I didn't want to get my hopes up, but at the same time, I knew Dave had been holding on to the hope that one day things might change. I opened the letter slowly, feeling the weight of every word as I read it. Dear, your name, asterisk I've thought a lot about the past few years. I know I hurt you, and I know I took you for granted. I was angry and confused, and I used that to push you away, even though you were always there for me. It's taken me a long time to realize that I was wrong, asterisk asterisk I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were, but I want to try. I want to rebuild something, anything. I don't expect things to be perfect, but I'm hoping that we can start again. I miss you, and I miss having you in my life, asterisk the words hit me harder than I expected. Part of me wanted to dismiss it, to put the letter away and walk away from the whole thing once and for all. But the other part, the part that had loved her, that had fought for her, was torn. Was this real? Was she sincere? Could she truly be reaching out after all this time? I handed the letter back to Dave, my fingers shaking slightly. What do you think? He asked, his eyes filled with uncertainty. I didn't know how to answer. I'd spent so long protecting myself from this very possibility, and now that it was here, I was unsure how to move forward. I think it's her choice now, I said, my voice calm but full of emotion. She has to prove to me that she truly means what she says. I'm not going to keep opening my heart to someone who doesn't show up for me. Dave nodded, understanding the weight of my words. I get it. You don't owe her anything. But if you're open to it, maybe we can take things slowly. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I didn't want to close the door forever. After everything we had been through, I owed it to myself to at least hear her out. A few days later, we arranged to meet at a quiet cafe, a neutral ground, away from the heavy memories of family gatherings. Emily was late, and I could feel my heart pounding as I waited. Part of me wanted to walk out, to never look back. But there was a part of me that missed the girl she used to be, the girl I had tried so hard to love. When she finally walked in, she looked different, older, more mature. Her eyes were tired, but there was something else there too. She was nervous. She had probably spent the entire drive over wondering if I would even show up, let alone talk to her. She sat across from me, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her coffee cup. For a few moments, neither of us said anything. It felt like the years between us had stretched on forever, and all that time had left an invisible wall. Finally, she spoke. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I had to try. I was so wrong to push you away. I don't expect us to be close again, but I just want you to know I'm sorry. I've learned so much these past few years, and I regret losing you. I know I can't change the past, but I hope we can find some kind of peace. Her voice cracked on the last sentence, and for the first time, I saw the vulnerability I hadn't seen in her before. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be some grand reunion where everything was magically fixed. But this was a start. I don't know if we can go back to what we were, I said quietly. But I can listen. And maybe, just maybe, we can find a new way forward. But it's going to take time. Emily nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm okay with that. And for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not because I was ready to welcome her back with open arms, but because I knew that, for the first time, we were both willing to try. As we sat there in that cafe, the conversation slowly started to flow. It was strange, like we were two strangers trying to reconnect, but there was a familiarity in the air, one I hadn't felt in so long. Emily apologized again, this time for the years of silence, for the way she had shut me out. She explained that in the years since the wedding, she had struggled with her own identity, with her relationship with her father, and with the expectations of everyone around her. It wasn't an excuse, but it was the truth. I've had a lot of time to think about how I treated you, Emily said, her voice trembling. I thought I needed to distance myself to figure things out, but I didn't realize that in doing so, I was losing you. You were always there for me, and I took that for granted. I'm sorry. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't consumed by the resentment that had built up over the years. I realized that, like her, I had been holding on to the past, holding on to the idea of what our relationship could have been, instead of accepting what it had become. I don't know what the future holds for us, Emily, I said, my voice steady. But I do know that it's going to take time. A lot of time. I can't just forget what happened, and I can't pretend that everything is fine. She nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. I get it. I don't expect anything to change overnight. I just want you to know that I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere. We sat in silence for a while, both of us processing what had just been said. There was a weight in the air, but it wasn't the same heavy burden I had carried for so long. It felt lighter, somehow. I wasn't sure if we would ever be close like we once were, but this felt like the beginning of something new, a slow, tentative rebuilding. Over the next few months, we kept in touch. Small, cautious conversations at first, but with each one, I felt the distance between us shrinking. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of awkwardness, moments when I felt like I was walking on eggshells. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just open to the possibility that we could rebuild, even if it meant doing it one step at a time. Dave was cautiously optimistic, too. He could see the change in me, the way I was approaching the situation with a sense of calm that I hadn't had before. I had stopped expecting Emily to be the daughter I had hoped for. Instead, I was learning to accept her as she was, flawed, human, and in need of healing, just like me. As the months went by, we had a few more face-to-face meetings. Slowly, we started talking about things other than the past, our lives, our struggles, the things that had shaped us into who we were now. Emily had changed. She was no longer the angry, distant girl I had once known. She had matured, and though we still had a long way to go, I could see the effort she was putting in. One afternoon, as we sat in a park near my house, Emily turned to me with a hesitant smile. I'm grateful for this, she said quietly. For us being able to talk again. I didn't think this would ever happen. I thought you'd hate me forever. I shook my head, a small smile tugging at the corner of my lips. I didn't hate you, Emily. I was just hurt. But I'm learning to forgive. Not for you, but for me. We sat in silence again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. This time, it was peaceful. We were two people, no longer bound by the pain of the past, but instead, trying to build something new. It wasn't going to be perfect, and it wasn't going to happen overnight. But it was progress, and progress was enough. Later that day, Emily sent me a message. It was a simple text, just a few words, but it meant everything to me. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. It's not a second chance. It's just the first step. And we'll take it one day at a time, and that was all we needed to say. Because we both knew that the road ahead would be long, but as long as we were willing to walk it together, there was hope. As the weeks passed, Emily and I continued to take things slowly. There were moments of joy, laughing over shared memories, bonding over new experiences, but there were also moments of silence, times when I wondered if we were just pretending to rebuild something that couldn't be fixed. But even in those moments, I never felt the same weight of anger or resentment that I had once carried. It was as if the years of bitterness had been shed, layer by layer, and what was left was a fragile foundation, a foundation that, while delicate, was still capable of growing. I realized that I had spent so much time waiting for Emily to be the person I wanted her to be, the daughter I had dreamed of, that I had overlooked who she was now. And the truth was, she was still figuring things out. So was I. But we were doing it together, even if it was in small steps. And sometimes, small steps were all we needed. One day, a few months after that last conversation in the park, Emily called me. Her voice was nervous, but there was something in it that made my heart skip a beat. Can we meet again? There's something I want to say. I agreed, my mind racing. Was this a breakthrough? Or was I about to be disappointed again? We met at the same cafe where we'd had our first real conversation, and when Emily sat down across from me, she seemed different, more grounded, more certain of herself. I've been thinking a lot, she started, her hands clenched around her coffee cup. And I want to say thank you. Not just for being patient with me, but for everything. For all those years when I was pushing you away, when I didn't realize how much you cared. I see it now. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for taking it all for granted. Tears welled up in my eyes as I listened. This was the daughter I had always hoped to hear from, the one who understood what I had given, the one who truly saw me. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't erase the pain, but in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. True peace. I'm sorry too, Emily, I said softly. Sorry for holding on to things that didn't serve either of us. We've both been hurt, and maybe we couldn't change the past, but we can change the future. One step at a time. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. I want to be part of your life. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I want to try. I don't want to lose you again. I nodded, my heart swelling. We don't have to have all the answers right now. We'll figure it out together. And for the first time, I truly believed that. Not because everything was perfect or because we had magically erased the pain of the past, but because we were finally willing to try. We weren't the same people we had been before, too much had changed, and too much had been broken. But we were willing to rebuild. And that was enough. As we left the cafe that day, something shifted. There was a weight lifted, not because of some grand gesture, but because of the quiet understanding that we had both changed. That we were both ready to accept the other as they were, flaws, mistakes, and all. The road ahead wasn't going to be without its challenges, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had learned that sometimes, the people we love need space to grow, to find themselves, and that it's okay to let them go for a while. What mattered was that, in the end, we came back to each other, not as the people we once were, but as the people we had become. And in that, I found a new kind of love. One that was imperfect, but real. And that was enough. With that, I felt like the story of Emily and I had come full circle. It wasn't about getting back what we lost, it was about learning to move forward, together. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but it was real. And that was the kind of love I could live with.